Hello there. I hope you're doing well. I'm just enjoying this coffee from Kawava. It's a local roaster here in Portland. It's an Ethiopian roast, and honestly, Kawava is one of my favorite roasters that I'm subscribed to. This one has an interesting mix of flavors. It's got some chocolate, it's got a hint of pine, and some fruit flavors to it. So it's a very nice mix of flavors. Definitely recommend getting the Ambessa if you're willing to spend some serious money on coffee, at least like I am. So today we're going to talk about Babel by R.F. Kuang. And this book actually is the reason why I decided to start talking about books in the fashion that I do, which is books within conversations of each other. Because I wrote my first blog, or I guess it was kind of a book review, about books in conversation around the Babel and the Blood in the Machine by Brian Merchant. And I wrote them because I wrote this together because I felt that there was a lot of it was a good lens to analyze the Babel by, because The Blood in the Machine is a book about the Luddite Civil War in Britain during the early 1800s. Babel takes place about 50 years later, so 1850s. But the world of Babel is heavily influenced by the fact that the Luddite Revolution did happen. I don't think Babel was a perfect book. I think that I had some issues with some portions of it, specifically that some parts of it were just really a slog. It just felt like it took too long in some places. It was trying to set up a specific type of world, and I think it was trying to go for something along the vibe of dark academia or something. I'm not super familiar with that genre. I don't care too much about this micro genres. What I found interesting about this book was the magic system. I mean, there is some problems with the way colonialism was portrayed. There were some problems with the education system. You know, it was a bad time to be a minority. So the way the magic system operates, and it's actually part of the reason why I have this book out here, which is Technology in the Making of the Netherlands, is that whenever you have one word in a language like English and you have a word in a language like Dutch, there's some gap between what the words actually mean and what their understood meaning is in their specific languages. So gezellig is a Dutch word that means, in English, the closest translation would be cozy. So in this system, on this bar of silver, special type of silver, you would write gezellig on one side, and then on the other side you would write cozy. And the farther the gap between those two words and what they mean would produce some magical effect related to what the words mean. I would expect that with cozy and gezellig, you would have something like you would feel very cared for in this environment. You would feel very warm. You would feel like your family is there. And it would be a place that you would want to be as much as you can. So the Dutch like to kind of say that gezellig is cozy, but with love of family and the fireplace roaring and kind of all that whole comfort of home that cozy doesn't really describe, especially with the way we're using it now with cozy fantasy and cozy video games and all that. It really has that tension between the different languages. Another one that's a good example is pindakaas and peanut butter. Pindakaas is much closer to peanut butter because, I mean, it's like peanut cheese. Kaas is cheese in Dutch, and pinda is peanut. So that would be much, much closer, and you would get significantly less magical output from this because it is basically, you know, a minor difference between butter and kaas. I mean, they're basically the same thing, just a different phase of butter's life, if you will. That particular spell or combination of words would have minimal power. The magic, as it is used between these two different words, the magic seems to learn the differences and it becomes less potent over time. So maybe at first the Hazelic and Cozy was a very powerful spell, but over time, because of the consistent use of it and the similarities between the languages overall, because Dutch and English aren't very far apart in a lot of ways, it would lose its power. So people had to go and try and find new sources of power. And the source of power is more extreme languages. The protagonist of this book is the very explicit domination of Britain over China. And it is gross, to say the least. One of the main, I don't know if he's an antagonist or just character. I mean, in some ways he's an antagonist. I would say he becomes more of an antagonist towards the end. Otherwise, he's just kind of a piece of shit. He goes to China and finds destitute women and impregnates them to have a child in China that he sends money to, which would be, considering the disparity between Britain's economy and China's economy at the time, it would have been a minimal expense for a very rich man to do, especially with what he was trying to do with it. This boy was raised in China for a number of years, such that his primary language was Chinese or Mandarin. I'm not even sure if his native language was clearly specified, if it was Mandarin, Cantonese, or some other. And if it was, I definitely forgot. It's not really a significant point other than the fact that he knows it and he's an expert in it because he is a native speaker. I mean, it's one of those things where he's then taken to England at a very young age, and he is tutored by this man, which you later find out is his father, which taken to England and taught all these different languages to make sure that he understands how to do this magic. I know that from friends or people who were originally a native English speaker up until their youth, that they were in Spanish or something, that they often lost a lot of the ability to speak it. So I don't know how realistic it is, but whatever. I mean, it's a magic book. It's fantasy. It's realistic fantasy or magical realism or whatever. The whole point is that the language is just seen as another resource to plunder in the same way that silver and coal and other resources are. And the people are just another part of that to be plundered. There's no value in the child to his father. In fact, you learn pretty quickly on in the book that he's not the only child that he did this with, and he has an older brother who he went through the exact same process with, and eventually disowned and threw aside because he wasn't willing to support the colonial project. And at one point, they go back to China, and the main character feels like he's a stranger in his own homeland. So it kind of highlights that this total destruction of homeness that immigrants feel when they're moved because they have no other choice. So the Blood in the Machine is a really interesting book. It's a very specific history book that looks into what Brian Merchant clearly believes is a intentional effort to smear the Luddites and into thinking that Luddites are anti-technology. And in fact, Merchant argues that Luddites are pro-technology. They are against a form of exploitative capitalism. And I think I have this book here, Technology and the Making of the Netherlands, because in my master's program, it actually was offered as a counterpoint between what Britain was doing in making lower quality and increasing productivity and things like that during the Industrial Revolution, whereas in the Netherlands, the entire intention was control. They wanted to control their workers more, and so that's why they started using the same machines that were popular in England. So even within countries, the Industrial Revolution happened differently. I don't think in the Netherlands they had a sort of Luddite uprising. I think that's because they were on a declining end of empire during that part. The real aim of the Luddites was to share in the benefits of capital, of the new technology, try and force higher quality materials. I think we're all familiar with the degradation of quality in our clothing. The clothes that you bought in the 90s or older, you can get at the thrift store. They seem to last forever. But new stuff that you get through fast fashion falls apart within a season, kind of almost like it's intentional to force you to go buy the newest fashion. Luddites were fighting against that, the fast fashion of the time. They wanted to continue making high quality products that required years of training to be able to master the tools, to master the craft. And they wanted to get the benefits of it. They didn't want some schmuck who happened to be rich that decided that they wanted to exploit their workers to make all the money off of it. So the Luddites would go and destroy this new class of machine, and only that new class of machine. They didn't destroy the old class of machine that they were trained on. And they had pretty clear demands that they wanted time off, they wanted revenue, they wanted to be paid a fair share, because they were craftsmen, they were tradesmen. This was at a time whenever cottage industry literally was a family, a multi-generational family, working together in their home to make a part of the supply chain. Either they were take wool from shepherds and they would spin it into yarn, and then somebody would dye that yarn, and then that yarn would then be sold to someone to turn the yarn into sweaters or some other sort of clothing, depending on what they were trying to make. And each family, like each area within this portion of Britain, or England more specifically, they had an expertise in this, and they had pride in it. They wanted to make high quality clothing that could last for years, because people couldn't afford to buy clothes all the time and every year. And they made good money from it because it was high quality material. But they also were willing to trade for food and other amenities with some people who were down on their luck. And they were, in a way you could think of this was community action, communal support, communities working together to thrive and improve everybody's living condition, compared to someone who wanted to optimize and maximize their money that they would return. the capitalists would drive down wages because they were driving down price, and they would want to make sure that they recouped as much money as they could out of it. They also used child labor. It was one of the kind of reignitions of child labor. You could argue that there was always some child labor in the cottage industry, but they were considered apprentices, and they were given tasks that were commensurate with their skill. But with the tools that were now being sold, there wasn't a lot of need for as much skill. That was the point. And you could have children working very dangerous jobs, and you could get children from orphanages to do the work. And this is what they did. They built up company towns around the factories, and these factories would be far away from the current labor, so the labor would have to travel or would have to move to go work there. And they would move to a place where they had depressed wages. In the US, you could see this with companies moving from the Northeast to the Southwest or Southeast, and now to China or Mexico. It's always been a game of identifying the lowest cost wages to maximize the profits. The Luddites were, in a way, fighting for child safety, fighting for their own dignity in labor. They were fighting against exploitations, and they were trying to shut down this new type of economics. And one of the things that was really surprising to me that I don't think I really learned in the textbooks whenever I was in high school or whatever, whenever I learned about this, was that the British government had 30,000 troops in the middle portion of England fighting this guerrilla warfare of the Luddites. They had just as many troops in India at the time, and they were subjugating that subcontinent. The disparity in the amount of troops that they needed to fight the Luddites compared to fighting the people is pretty incredible. And since this happened around 1810 to 1820, the British also invaded the United States. That was during the War of 1812. So Britain was fighting at least 3 different wars at the same time while this civil war was going on. And it really was a civil war. When you have that many troops implemented in stopping something like this, that's not a small problem. The Crown was very much against the Luddite upbringing. They really wanted to tamp down on it. They thought that it was going to lead to further fracturing of the British Empire. They thought that it was going to lead to an uprising in Ireland and Scotland, even though it really was better for the people to continue having these higher paid wages. I mean, there was starvation in the middle of England. It was bad. It was a bad time. It essentially, for the workers, was like the U.S.'s Great Depression. It was a horrific time for these workers because they did not want to work for pennies compared to what they were making before, or pences. I think one thing is important that we need to think about is, what does it mean to be a Luddite in the modern day? Because I think to some extent I am something of a Luddite. I am against blockchain. I don't support NFTs. I think that they're a waste of money and a waste of, there's no inherent value there. I'm against a lot of generative AI. And I think if you are an artist and you use Glaze, let me correct that. If you're an artist and you use a software called Glaze or Nightshade, you are effectively a Luddite. And that is because you are going and destroying the newest means of capital generation of lower cost art. You know, I can have a subscription to Mid-Journey for $20 a month, and I could get all the a starting screen, a stop animation, and I could get, you know, little emojis for my channel if I wanted to. Instead, I'm going to be paying what would amount to 10 to 12 months of Mid-Journey subscription for the art that I'm getting done for my channel. And I think it's worth doing. I mean, I want artists to have a living wage. I love art. I consume art all the time. I have art books over on my book stand over there. Part of the reason why I have these fancy books here is that I love the art added to classics, because it adds a layer of dimension to it. I pay artists for my book covers, because I mean, this is beautiful, right? I can't do this myself. I can't, and I don't think that I could ever have an AI do that. I mean, I just don't think that it would look good. Using glaze is a way of destroying art in ChatGPT or Mid-Journey or any of those other art tools, Sora. And I think that's good. I think that we should have the opportunity to protect our art. I expect that my books, my blogs, and my short stories have probably been consumed by these tools as well. And I'm not happy about that. I don't know what to do about it, but I expect that it's in these AI tools. So why do I think that Babel is a Luddite piece of art? Well, because of what happens as the main character gets radicalized, he starts to understand what colonialism is, especially whenever he goes back to China, and they end up destroying, causing significant problems with getting silver back from China to the mainland, to England, which, given that steam power still exists, you can think of silver as the coal of the world at this point. These children are forced to learn languages to go to Babel, and in Babel, they are basically doing work for capitalists. You can really think about it as an analog to grad students these days, where they're paid a pittance and they are doing most of the research for the scientific community. They are designing new pieces of equipment. They're funding the future of technology and building it. So you can think of the students that are in these programs. They are basically paid to maintain the British Empire. One of the things that apparently happens, there's wear on these pieces of silver, where over time the writing on each side will be pushed out and it will become a regular piece of silver again. And so the maintenance is that they need to go in and fix that and kind of, reinscribe the language on there. And in some cases, they actually need to replace the piece of silver with a new, more powerful pair of languages. So, they mentioned Sanskrit, and they mentioned various forms of Chinese and Japanese and so on. These students are basically hired out to the crown and to capitalists to go and maintain their empires, to go to factories and put in the power and maintain the power to these machines. One of the things that is also important, I think, is that there is this tension between the upper class and the lower class in the blood in the machine, and that the lower class is just as capable of inventing, creating new machines, being technologically savvy, figuring out how to make more with less. And I think there's an analogy there, or commonality with the main character, Robin Swift in Babel, where he is treated very poorly by his father, and he is often shown to be the superior person to his father, and or at least as capable. And I think that's something that's important in comparing these books, is the working class. They are capable. I know personally that I have met some of the smartest people whenever I was working a blue collar job. They were brilliant men who wanted to work with their hands, and they just weren't able to do school. And I think the world was better off for them where they were, because they did great things, and they were amazing people to learn from, and to learn the respect for tradesmen. And I think every engineer needs to go and do that. And I think that capitalists like Elon Musk and some of the ones that were being fought against in Blood in the Machine, they have money, and they don't really respect what the working class brings to the table. They just want people to do the work for them, and they want to control labor. They want to punish labor. The main thing is that at a certain point, there is an alliance between the tradespeople and the uprising of the student body and of these professors. And it is very much a protracted pitched battle around this school in Oxford. There are troops being brought in. There's a standoff between the crown and the leaders of this kind of rebellion, and where the tradespeople refuse to protect London Bridge, and there's a countdown to when the bridge will collapse. And the tradespeople expect the crown to blink, but the crown doesn't. The bridge collapses, killing hundreds of people. Tradespeople realize that the only recourse they have is escalation. What's escalation from there? Destroying the means of production. I'll let you read the book at that point to go and understand what they decide to do. But it really is a fight against modernity, using technology to enrich a select few at the cost of the many. And I think reading Blood in the Machine really will provide a lot of context to Babel that makes it a better book. And I happen to have read them in that order, so I really enjoyed Babel because of it. I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I hadn't. I would have thought that it was a less well done Earthsea, Wizards of Earthsea type book. But I enjoyed it because of the additional context I have of the Luddite revolution. I really appreciate you spending time with me. I really hope that you enjoy this video. Please comment, like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that sort of stuff. Please provide feedback. I really, really would enjoy your feedback on this. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.